Good day, friends. I'm Kerry Dillinger. This is Bible Class Topics. We want to start a new series of lessons entitled Living Our Christian Life. This is Lesson 1, Denying Self. Let's get our Bibles out and turn to Matthew 16, verses 24 through 26. Then Jesus told his disciples, "If anyone would come after me, let him deny himself and take up his cross and follow me. For whoever would save his life will lose it, but whoever loses his life for my sake will find it. For what will it profit a man if he gains the whole world and forfeits his soul? Or what shall a man give in return for his soul?" Since the introduction of sin into the world, men and women have cast off the love and fear of God and given themselves to the dominion and love of self. Since the introduction of sin into the world, men and women have acted selfishly, making their own will and honor more important to them than anything else in the world. Listen to Paul as he speaks to his Roman readers in chapter 3, verses 9 through 18. What then? Are we Jews any better off? No, not at all. For we have already charged that all, both Jews and Greeks, are under sin, as it is written, "None is righteous, no, not one. No one understands, no one seeks for God. All have turned aside. Together they have become worthless. No one does good, not even one. Their throat is an open grave, and they use their tongues to deceive. The venom of asps is under their lips. Their mouth is full of curses and bitterness. Their feet are swift to shed blood. In their paths are ruin and misery, and the way of peace they have not known. There is no fear of God before their eyes." And of course here Paul is quoting from the psalmist, the wise man who wrote the Proverbs, the prophet Jeremiah, and the prophet Isaiah, to make his point concerning the fact that man refuses to deny self. And I should say man, not man, but humankind. So, Godhood, recognizing a sinful person's need, sent Jesus. And Jesus, according to Luke 19:10, said he came to seek and save the lost. And God gave us the gospel then to bring us back to the state from which we have fallen. And according to what we've already read in Matthew 16, verses 24 through 26, the first step toward this restoration, this reconciliation with God, is to deny self. Let's start with two observations about self-denial. For one to follow Jesus, it must be by a person's own free will and convictions. The person must voluntarily renounce everything that might hinder their discipleship. Paul wrote to the Thessalonians in the first letter, chapter 5, verses 19 through 22, "Do not quench the spirit, do not despise prophecies, but test everything. Hold fast what is good. Abstain from every form of evil." So what is denying self? What is self-denial? I think we can easily equate it with a complete submission to the will of God. Before we talk about what self-denial does mean, let's talk about what self-denial does not mean and what self-denial does not require. Self-denial does not mean one has no obligation to take care of oneself and one's affairs. Writing to the young preacher Timothy in the first letter, chapter 5, verse 8, Paul said, "But if anyone does not provide for his relatives, and especially for members of his own household, he has denied the faith and is worse than an unbeliever." Self-denial does not mean one must refuse temporal honors and riches bestowed on them lawfully and honorably. Self-denial does not give one license to be careless of their life, their health, and their family. What does self-denial not require? Self-denial does not require that one divest themselves of the comfort and convenience of the material benefits of the world derived from secular employment. Remember the story of Ananias and Sapphira told in Acts chapter 5? They had a piece of property. They sold it. They brought the money and told the apostles that this was everything they made from the profit of that sale, when indeed they had held some of it back. But they wanted to look like they were giving it all. Of course, Peter, through the gift of the Holy Spirit, was able to see into their hearts and know that they were lying. He said, "While it remained unsold, did it not remain your own? And after it was sold, was it not at your disposal? Why is it that you have contrived this deed in your heart? You've not lied to man, you've lied to God." As long as they told the truth concerning the sale of this property, they were in good graces with not only the apostles, but God as well. Another thing that self-denial does not require, and even though in times past we have heard of people that have practiced this as part of their so-called Christianity, that is, self-denial does not require self-hate or self-harm. In the Ephesian letter, chapter 5, verse 29, "For no one ever hated his own flesh, but nourishes and cherishes it, just as Christ does the church." Of course, Paul is making a point about how Christ nourishes the church, but he uses the example of the fact that every person needs to nourish and cherish their own body. So, these are the things that self-denial does not require. Now we'll spend the bulk of our time studying today vital principles and factors of self-denial. Only when these factors and principles are considered will one learn what is to be denied. So we'll start with those things which are to be denied. Number one, our own understanding. That is, our own understanding so far as not to lean upon it independent of divine instruction. Let's listen to two verses from the Proverbs. First, chapter 3, verses 5 and 6, and I should say 3 verses. "Trust in the Lord with all your heart, and do not lean on your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge him, and he will make straight your paths." And then dropping down to chapter 28, verse 26, the proverb writer said, "Whoever trusts in his own mind is a fool, but he who walks in wisdom will be delivered." We must then deny our own understanding when it conflicts with the things that we've been taught by God. We have to deny our own will, so far as it opposes the will of God. Back to Ephesians, the 5th chapter, verse 15, "Look carefully then how you walk, not as unwise, but as wise, making the best use of the time, because the days are evil. Therefore do not be foolish, but understand what the will of the Lord is." Then turning over to 2 Peter chapter 2, verse 9, the Lord knows how to rescue the godly from trials, and to keep the unrighteous under punishment until the day of judgment, and especially those who indulge in the lust of defiling passion and despise authority. And then Paul in Titus 1, verse 7, for an overseer, as God's steward, must be above reproach. He must not be arrogant or quick-tempered or a drunkard or violent or greedy for gain. Things that need to be denied then include our own understanding and our will, and, number 3, our affections. That is, our affections when they go beyond the limits God has put in place. Let's read 7 verses from Colossians chapter 3, beginning in verse 1. If then you have been raised with Christ, seek the things that are above, where Christ is, seated at the right hand of God. Set your minds on things that are above, not on things on the earth, for you have died, and your life is hidden with Christ in God. When Christ, who is your life, appears, then you also will appear with him in glory. Therefore, put to death what is earthly in you, namely sexual immorality, impurity, passion, evil desire, and covetousness, which is idolatry. On account of these, the wrath of God is coming. In these you too once walked when you were living in them. James, the Lord's half-brother, in his short letter, chapter 1, verse 13, says, let no one say when he is tempted, I'm being tempted by God. For God cannot be tempted with evil, and he himself tempts no one. But each person is tempted when he's lured and enticed by his own desire. Then desire, when it has conceived, gives birth to sin, and sin, when it is fully grown, brings forth death. The fourth thing we want to put in our list of things to be denied then is physical gratification. And that needs to be denied when seeking its fulfillment is out of the due course that God has given. Turning back to the Roman letter, chapter 6, verse 12, let not sin therefore reign in your mortal body to make you obey its passions. Do not present your members to sin as instruments for unrighteousness, but present yourselves to God as those who have been bought from death to life. I said bought. The passage says brought. My apologies. I'm going to start the sentence over again. Do not present your members to sin as instruments for unrighteousness, but present yourselves to God as those who have been brought from death to life, and your members to God as instruments for righteousness. Then in the Sermon on the Mount in Matthew chapter 5, beginning in verse 29, the Lord said, if your right eye causes you to sin, tear it out and throw it away. For it is better that you lose one of your members than your whole body be thrown into hell. And if your right hand causes you to sin, cut it off and throw it away. For it is better that you lose one of your members than that your whole body go into hell. In 1 Corinthians chapter 7, verse 2, the Apostle Paul said, but because of the temptation to sexual immorality, each man should have his own wife, and each woman her own husband. And the Hebrew writer in chapter 13, verse 4, said this about marriage. Let marriage be held in honor among all, and let the marriage bed be undefiled, for God will judge the sexually immoral and adulterous of this world. The fifth factor of self-denial, a thing to be denied, is honors of this world, namely the praise of men, when these things become a snare. Let's turn back to the Hebrew writer again, this time chapter 11, verse 24. By faith, Moses, when he was grown up, refused to be called the son of Pharaoh's daughter, choosing rather to be mistreated with the people of God than to enjoy the fleeting pleasures of sin. He considered the reproach of Christ greater wealth than the treasures of Egypt, for he was looking to the reward. And then in the Gospel of John, chapter 12, verse 42, nevertheless, many, even of the authorities, believed in Jesus, but for fear of the Pharisees they did not confess it, so that they would not be put out of the synagogue. Why? For they love the glory that comes from man more than the glory that comes from God. In the Galatian letter, chapter 6, verse 14, we hear Paul say, "But far be it from me to boast except in the cross of our Lord Jesus Christ, by which the world has been crucified to me and I to the world." The sixth thing we want to discuss concerning things to be denied is unlawful gain. Any profit that we obtain unlawfully is a sin. And any profit, when we obtain it, and it's in opposition to the faith of Christ and one's usefulness in God's service, that is, usefulness in God's service, needs to be denied. Remember the story of the rich young ruler? He came to Jesus wanting to know what he needed to do to be in a right relationship with God. In Mark 10, 21 and 22, Jesus, looking at him, loved him and said to him, "You lack one thing. Go sell all that you have and give it to the poor, and you will have treasure in heaven, and come follow me." Disheartened by the saying, he went away sorrowful, for he had great possessions. The seventh thing we want to mention in our list of things to be denied are friends and relatives, so far as they oppose the truth and would influence one also to oppose the truth. Jesus makes this abundantly clear in Matthew 10, 34 through 37. He said, "Do not think that I have come to bring peace to the earth. I have not come to bring peace, but a sword. For I have come to set a man against his father, and a daughter against her mother, and a daughter-in-law against her mother-in-law. And a person's enemies will be those of his own household. Whoever loves father or mother more than me is not worthy of me, and whoever loves son or daughter more than me is not worthy of me." The eighth thing we want to mention that needs to be denied are our personal rights and liberties. Whenever we fail to do so, and they would put a stumbling block in front of another. 1 Corinthians chapter 8, verse 13. "Therefore, if food makes my brother stumble, I will never eat meat lest I make my brother stumble." And then in chapter 10, verse 23, Paul does remind them that all things are lawful, but not all things are helpful. All things are lawful, but not all things build up. And the ninth and final thing we want to mention in this lesson concerning things to be denied is one's own life. For Christ's sake, when to save it, it would be a compromise with error and the forces of error. In Matthew 10, 38 and 39, we hear something very, very similar to what we read in Matthew 16, 24 through 26. Jesus said, "And whoever does not take his cross and follow me is not worthy of me. And whoever finds his life will lose it, and whoever loses his life for my sake will find it." In the second chapter of Revelation, John records this message from Christ: "Do not fear what you're about to suffer. Behold, the devil is about to throw some of you into prison that you may be tested, and for 10 days you will have tribulation. Be faithful unto death, and I will give you the crown of life." And finally, back to 1 Corinthians, this time chapter 8, verses 9 and 10. But take care that this right of yours does not somehow become a stumbling block to the weak. For if anyone sees you who have knowledge eating in an idol's temple, will he not be encouraged, if his conscience is weak, to eat food offered to idols? Everything sinful and that fails to qualify as glorifying God must be denied, no matter how pleasant and apparently advantageous that thing may seem to us. And as we began our lesson, we end our lesson, we must deny self, we must take up our cross, and we must follow Jesus. If you look in the description below, you will find a set of 7 discussion questions. I'm putting those there so that you can use this lesson as a Bible study, not only for yourself, but perhaps for a small group, and you can continue the lesson by discussing those questions among yourselves. Those will be in the description below. Our lesson today comes from Gene Taylor's workbook, Oh, to Be Like Thee, Volume 1, which can be downloaded at www.padfield.com. I'll put a link in the description below directly to that PDF document so that you don't have to wait on me for Lesson 2. You can go ahead at your own pace. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you for staying to the end of the video. That is a great help for the channel, as well as your subscription, as well as giving this video a like or even a dislike, leaving a comment, and sharing a link to someone that you would like to study this lesson with. We hope to be back in just a few more days here on Bible Class Topics. Until then, may God bless.